I'll tell you the truth. I never thought a can of paint could expose the worst in people. Not until the day I watched an HOA board turn a simple charcoal gray fence into a battlefield. My name is Adrian Okafor, and if you've ever lived in one of those picturesque suburban neighborhoods where the grass is aggressively green and the smiles aggressively fake, then you already know exactly the type of person I'm about to describe. The color police. The rule guardians, the self-appointed emperors of community standards. And leading the pack in our neighborhood was a woman named Carol, though everyone quietly called her Color Cop Carol. But before I tell you what she tried to do to my family, before I explain how a shade of gray ignited a war she absolutely was not prepared for, let me welcome you properly. If you're new here, make yourself comfortable because things get deep quick. Welcome to Honorbound Tales, where I break down real stories of justice, consequences, and the moments when ordinary people reclaim their power. If you haven't already, hit like, subscribe, and drop your location in the comments so I know how far our stories travel. Now, buckle in, because this one gets messy. I was 26 when this happened, old enough to know the world doesn't always play fair, young enough to still believe I could fix things with a little patience and a rational explanation. My parents had just moved into the community, a place called Silvercrest Meadows. Sounds peaceful, right? Sounds like kids on bikes and neighbors walking their Labradors and block parties with bland potato salad. But every paradise has a gatekeeper, and in Silvercrest Meadows, that gatekeeper was Carol. My parents didn't tell me they were repainting the backyard fence. They didn't want to bother me. My mother, who's never been scared of a project a day in her life, picked a dark charcoal gray shade. Beautiful, clean, modern. My father helped her brush the final coat on the wood. They stood back and admired their work. Then, the next morning, a letter showed up. A violation notice, a threat, a demand. The fence color was unapproved. Not too bright, not too distracting, not in the palette, just unapproved. My parents didn't argue, they didn't fight, they didn't even call me at first. They simply emailed the HOA asking for clarification, because they, like most reasonable people, assumed this was a misunderstanding. But you don't reason with someone like Carol. She called my mother personally, didn't greet her, didn't apologize for the abruptness. She simply launched into a script, cold, rehearsed, condescending. Your fence color violates our neighborhood aesthetic and must be repainted immediately. Eggshell white is the approved shade for all backyard fences. Failure to comply will result in fines. My mother, who has survived war, immigration, poverty, and running her own business, did not take that tone well. She told Carol she'd like to review the HOA's official palette names and codes before repainting anything. That's all. A simple, reasonable request. Carol hung up on her. That's when my phone rang. I was sitting in my office at Okafra Coatings, the company I built from a college side hustle into one of the state's fastest-growing exterior paint suppliers. We weren't massive, yet, but we'd landed some major municipal and private contracts, including one signed 6 months earlier for a homeowners association that ordered thousands of gallons of gate paint every year. Guess which HOA? Yep. Silvercrest Meadows, my family's new neighborhood. And guess what else? The HOA-approved gate color, the one used on every entrance arch, every mailbox pedestal, every perimeter fence, was one of my company's signature mid-tone charcoal grays. The exact same undertone as the color my parents chose. You needed a trained eye to even tell them apart. So when my mother told me they'd been threatened with fines for painting a backyard fence in a color nearly indistinguishable from the neighborhood's gate paint, a color they had been unknowingly looking at every day since moving in, something in me snapped. But not in anger, no, in clarity. HOA boards thrive on two things: people being uninformed and people being intimidated. My parents were neither. And now that the fight had reached my doorstep, Carol had no idea who she was dealing with. I told my parents to hold off. Don't repaint, don't reply, don't pay a dime. I would handle everything. I walked into that HOA office the next day, dressed in a clean collared shirt, slacks, and the calmest expression I could muster. It was a small building with polished floors, fake succulent plants, and motivational posters about community harmony. Irony has a smell, and it lives in places like that. Carol was behind the counter, tapping aggressively on a keyboard. She didn't look up. If you're here for a violation, you need to file an appeal in writing. I didn't move. Carol, I said, you sent a violation notice to my parents. She looked up then. Her eyes scanned me top to bottom, the way someone inspects a shopping cart for dents. She straightened in her chair. Oh, she said, you're, their son. The pause before their wasn't long, but it was enough. Yes, I replied, and I'm here to understand why my parents' fence color is a problem. She folded her arms. Because it violates our standards. It's unauthorized. The shade is disruptive to the community palette. Disruptive, I repeated slowly. Is that the official wording? It is now, she snapped, clearly enjoying her sense of control. Eggshell white only. That's the rule. No exceptions. You people always try to. She caught herself mid-sentence, but the damage was already done. You people. There it was. A phrase that meant more than she realized. A phrase that told me exactly what this conflict was really about. I didn't raise my voice, didn't lean forward, didn't challenge her physically. Instead, I smiled. Politely, almost sympathetically. Because this woman, for all her arrogance, had no idea she'd just trespassed into the wrong territory. Carol, I said, pulling a folder from my briefcase, this is the HOA's most recent paint supply contract. She blinked. Confusion cracked her confidence. You see this logo? I pointed to the top. HOA Coatings. That's my company. You've been buying paint from me for 2 years. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her eyes darted between the contract and my face. I continued gently, like I was explaining math to a child. And this color code here, the one used for your gates, it is extremely close to the color on my parents' fence. In fact, you've approved and purchased thousands of gallons of this shade. That's irrelevant, she stammered. No, I said, softly. It's very relevant. Her face flushed red. She straightened her papers aggressively, desperate to regain footing. Well, even if the colors are similar, your parents used an unapproved brand. We have to maintain consistency. It's protocol. This was the moment I knew she was spiraling. When people add extra rules that don't exist, the lies always start to multiply. Really? I asked. So you're saying the board chooses the brand? Yes, she lied. Good, because that means your board chooses my brand, since I'm your exclusive supplier. She froze. I let the silence simmer long enough for her to feel the weight of her mistake. Then I dropped the final nail. Carol, your contract with HOA Coatings automatically renews every 10 years. You're currently locked in, meaning every gate, every common area fence, every metal surface in this community will continue to use whatever color I provide. She swallowed hard. And starting next week, I slid a revised palette sheet across her desk. The only shade available from my company will be my parents' charcoal gray.
She blinked twice. What? You heard me. It's within my contractual rights. If you want eggshell white, you can source it from another supplier, but your board president signed exclusivity. You violated your own standards, Carol, not my parents. I leaned slightly closer. And since you threatened them, harassed them, and issued a baseless citation rooted in discriminatory language, I'll also be filing a report with the HOA Oversight Council. You'll want legal representation for that. Her jaw dropped. She looked like someone had unplugged her from the wall. You can't do this, she whispered. Carol, I said calmly, you did this. I walked out without another word. The next week was glorious. Every gate in the neighborhood, from the grand entrance arch to the pool enclosure, was repainted in the same deep charcoal gray that my parents had on their fence. Residents woke up confused, gossiping, arguing, trying to understand why everything suddenly matched the Okafor yard. People asked questions. Loud, public questions, especially about cost. And that's when everything unraveled for Color Cop Carol. Turns out she hadn't just harassed my parents. She'd been targeting multiple families for random, baseless violations and pocketing under-the-table expedited compliance fees. When she learned that the repainting bill for every gate was hitting the association's funds all at once, she panicked, tried to reverse it, tried to lie again. But she was too late. The HOA not only terminated her position on the board, they audited her. And when they discovered she'd intentionally defaced a section of my parents' fence to force compliance, she was hit with a vandalism charge. Total restitution owed? $180,000. The same price she once bragged she'd never have to pay because she was the law around here. Funny how fast a throne crumbles when it's built on ego instead of ethics. My parents kept their fence. No fines, no apologies from Carol. Of course, people like her don't apologize. But they didn't need one. Their victory was painted across the entire neighborhood. Literally. For months afterwards, neighbors would walk past our yard, smile and say, "Nice color." Some said it quietly, cautiously, like the fence still carried consequences. Others said it boldly, like they were proud someone finally stood up to the HOA bully. And me? I learned something too. Justice comes in many shades. Sometimes it's gold. Sometimes it's black and white. Sometimes it's charcoal gray with a satin finish. But it's always beautiful. So let me ask you, because I know some of you have lived through worse. What's the most ridiculous standoff you've ever had with an HOA, a neighbor, a coworker, or anyone else who tried to police something petty? And how creative did you get to defend your turf? Drop it in the comments. I'm reading everything. And if this story hit home or reminded you of someone in your life, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see just how far Honorbound Tales travels. Because every neighborhood has a Carol. But every Carol is one good justice story away from retirement.